Waiter fired for feeding abandoned dog, but the next day, Michael Anderson felt his stomach twist as he watched the skinny dog sniffing around food scraps near the dumpsters behind the restaurant. His double shift had started at 5 in the morning, and now late in the afternoon, all he could think about was how much that animal needed help. When he knelt on the sidewalk to offer his own lunch to the abandoned dog, he didn't notice the furious gaze of Richard Thompson, the manager, watching his every move from the restaurant door. "What do you think you're doing?" The deep voice cut through the air like a razor. Michael looked up, still holding the plate with the remains of his meal. The skinny dog licked the young waiter's fingers, perhaps the first kindness it had felt in weeks. "Mr. Thompson, You're just wasting the restaurant's food and making a disgraceful scene at our doorstep," Richard interrupted, raising his voice so the customers outside could hear. "That filthy animal could be sick. It could contaminate our customers." Michael's face burned. People had stopped to watch the argument, some whispering among themselves. The young man tried to explain it was his own food, but Richard had already made up his mind. "You're fired. Right now. Get your things and get out of my sight." "But sir, I need this job. My grandmother is sick and—" "You should have thought of that before putting on this circus act." Richard spat with disdain. "And if I catch you around here feeding that pest again, I'll call animal control to take it away." Tears stung Michael's eyes as he gathered his belongings from the break room. 23 years old, working 2 jobs to support his grandmother Dorothy, who had raised him alone, and now it was all crumbling because of one act of compassion. The dog was still waiting on the sidewalk when he stepped outside, as if it understood they were both in the same boat now. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Michael walked the streets of Denver with the dog by his side, unsure what to do. His tiny studio apartment in Hillcrest barely had enough room for him, let alone a dog that size. But when he stopped at a bakery to buy a loaf of bread with the little money he had left, the dog sat patiently beside him, not begging, just offering quiet companionship. "You don't have anyone either, huh?" Michael murmured, sharing the bread with the dog. "At least now there's 2 of us." That night, lying on the floor of his studio with the dog curled up beside him, Michael couldn't sleep. His grandmother Dorothy had called asking about this month's money, and he couldn't bring himself to tell her he'd lost his job. She was already struggling with expensive medications and doctor visits. How could he add this burden to her frail shoulders? Dawn brought a harsh reality. Michael had exactly $42 in his wallet and a few coins in his pocket. The dog needed a vet. Its ribs jutted out beneath its yellowish fur, and there was a wound on its back leg that needed attention. But first, he had to find another job. He left the dog at home with some water and went out to hand out resumes. Store after store, restaurant after restaurant. The answer was always the same: no openings. Or they wanted someone with more experience, or they simply never returned his calls. With every rejection, desperation grew heavier in his chest like a stone. When he returned home that evening, the dog was exactly where he'd left it, as if it hadn't moved an inch all day. The animal's loyalty touched something deep inside Michael. There stood a being who didn't judge him, who didn't care if he had money or a job, who simply accepted him. "You need a name," said Michael, stroking the animal's head. "How about loyal? That's what you are, right, buddy? Loyal." Loyal wagged his tail for the first time since they'd met, as if approving the choice. 3 days passed with no success in his job search. Michael had used his last dollars to buy food and taken Loyal to a public veterinary clinic, where he learned the animal was malnourished but had no serious illnesses. The wound on his paw was healing well with the basic care he'd managed to provide. It was on the morning of the 4th day that everything changed. Michael was at old Mr. Jenkins's bakery trying to negotiate some bread in exchange for work when an elegant lady entered the shop. She was about 50, with neatly styled grey hair and clothes that suggested financial comfort. Her eyes scanned the room before landing on Michael, who stood beside Loyal. "Please forgive my intrusion," she said, approaching urgently. "This dog, where did you find him?" Michael's heart raced. Did Loyal have an owner? The thought of losing him now after forming such a strong bond frightened him more than he'd imagined. "He was abandoned near the restaurant where I worked," he answered honestly. "Why? Do you know him?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I've been looking for this dog for 3 weeks. He belongs to my mother, Mrs. Margaret. He disappeared when she was hospitalized." Her voice trembled. "My name is Jennifer Wilson. I'm a lawyer. And you're the young man who was fired for feeding a stray dog." The connection left Michael stunned. How did she know about his firing? "I went to the restaurant yesterday looking for you," Jennifer continued. "The manager was very rude, said you'd been fired for inappropriate behavior, but some witnesses told me the truth. You saved Buddy." "Buddy?" "That's his name. My mother found him as a puppy 8 years ago, right after my father passed away. They became inseparable. When she had to be hospitalized for pneumonia, Buddy just vanished from the backyard. We thought someone had taken him or that he had..." Her voice faded for a moment. "I never imagined he'd try to find her." Michael looked at Loyal, now Buddy, who seemed to recognize Jennifer's voice. The dog approached her hesitantly, sniffing her hand before allowing a gentle pat. "How is your mother?" Michael asked, genuinely concerned. "Physically better, but emotionally devastated. Buddy was her only companion after my father left us. She blames herself for his disappearance." Jennifer looked at Michael with gratitude. "You can't imagine the gift you're giving me by returning him." "He hasn't been eating well," Michael admitted, embarrassed. "I tried to care for him as best I could, but I don't have much." "You did more for him than most would," Jennifer interrupted. "And I want to repay you for that. From what I heard, you lost your job because of him." Michael shook his head. "No repayment needed. I did it because I wanted to. Anyone would do the same." "No, Michael, not everyone would. Believe me, I know people well." Jennifer smiled for the first time. "But at least let me cover the expenses you had for him. And perhaps we can talk about a job opportunity." Michael's heart pounded. A job offer right when he needed it most seemed too good to be true. "I have a law office and need someone for general tasks. It's nothing glamorous, organizing documents, filing paperwork, keeping the office tidy. But it's honest work with fair pay." "I'll take anything," Michael said without hesitation. "I really need to work." "Then it's settled. You can start on Monday." Jennifer hesitated for a moment. "But first, I'd like to ask a favor. My mother is at Mercy Medical Center. Would you come with me to take Buddy to see her? I know it's a lot to ask, but..." "Of course," Michael replied immediately. "Whenever you're ready." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Mercy Medical Center was a place that had always intimidated Michael. White corridors, the smell of disinfectant, people in white rushing around. It all reminded him of the worst moments of his childhood, when he took his grandmother Dorothy to appointments and tests. But today there was a different feeling in the air. Jennifer had secured special permission for Buddy to visit Mrs. Margaret. The dog seemed anxious, as if sensing something important was about to happen. His ears were perked up, and he gently tugged on the leash toward the elevators. "Room 412, Jennifer murmured, as they walked down the hallway. "She doesn't know we found Buddy. I wanted it to be a surprise." Michael carried a small bag of treats he'd bought especially for Buddy. He wanted the dog to be well fed for his reunion with his owner. Over the 4 days they'd spent together, he'd noticed how affectionate and obedient Buddy was. Surely he'd be good for the old lady. When they reached the door, Jennifer took a deep breath. "Mom, I brought a special visitor for you." "Jennifer, sweetheart, you didn't have to..." A frail voice came from inside the room. Michael followed Jennifer in and saw a woman with completely white hair, thin with blue eyes that lit up the moment Buddy appeared in the doorway. Time seemed to stop. "Buddy?" Her voice was a disbelieving whisper. "My Buddy?" The dog didn't hesitate for a second. He pulled the leash from Michael's hand and ran to the bed, resting his front paws on the mattress and trying to get as close as possible to his owner. Mrs. Margaret stretched out her trembling arms and hugged the dog, tears streaming down her face. "Where have you been, my boy? Where have you been?" She repeated between sobs, as Buddy licked her face and whimpered softly. Michael felt a lump in his throat, watching the scene. He'd never witnessed such pure, unconditional love. Jennifer was also crying silently by the bed. "Mom, this is Michael," Jennifer said once Mrs. Margaret had calmed down a little. "He's the one who found and took care of Buddy these past few weeks." Mrs. Margaret looked up at Michael for the first time. When their eyes met, something strange happened. She studied him for a few seconds, as if trying to remember something. "Michael. Michael Anderson?" she asked hesitantly. Michael blinked in surprise. How did she know his last name? "Yes, ma'am." "How did you—" "Oh my goodness," Mrs. Margaret brought a hand to her chest. "You're Dorothy Anderson's grandson?" Now it was Michael's turn to be speechless. "You knew my grandmother?" "Knew her? Dorothy was my best friend for 30 years. We worked together at Westridge Elementary School. She was a lunch lady and I was a teacher." Mrs. Margaret's eyes sparkled at the memory. "We lost touch when she moved away to take care of you, after your parents." She stopped, realizing it might be a sensitive subject. "After my parents died in the accident," Michael finished softly. "Grandma always talked about a teacher friend named Margaret. But I never thought—" "What a small world," Jennifer murmured, watching the exchange. "How is she?" Mrs. Margaret asked warmly. "Dorothy has always been a strong woman, but I know raising a child alone couldn't have been easy." Michael hesitated. He didn't want to burden the sick woman with his grandmother's troubles, but something in her expression encouraged him to be honest. "She's dealing with some health issues, diabetes, high blood pressure. The medications are expensive and—" He stopped, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking about this. Michael, you saved my most loyal companion. You can tell me anything," Mrs. Margaret said firmly. "Does Dorothy need help?" "She'd never ask for it. She's too proud. But yes, it's been hard. That's why I needed that job at the restaurant so badly." Mrs. Margaret and Jennifer exchanged a meaningful glance. "Mum, Michael is going to work with me at the office starting Monday," Jennifer explained. "That's wonderful," Mrs. Margaret smiled. "And I want you to tell Dorothy that Margaret Wilson sends her regards, that I miss our talks during recess at school." "Wilson?" Michael connected the dots. "You're Dr. Jennifer's mother?" "I am. And now that I know who you are, I'm sure my daughter made the right choice hiring you. Dorothy always raised people with strong character." Michael left the hospital with a heart lighter than it had been in months. Seeing Mrs. Margaret's joy at being reunited with Buddy had been worth every sacrifice, and discovering the connection between her and his grandmother felt like fate. But when he got home, reality hit him again. He had a job opportunity, yes, but Mrs. Margaret would be going home in a few days and taking Buddy with her. After 4 days caring for the dog, the thought of parting with him hurt more than he'd imagined. "You'll miss him too, won't you, Grandma?" Michael murmured over the phone to Dorothy that night. He'd told her everything about reuniting with her childhood friend. "Margaret has always been a special person," his grandmother's frail voice came through the line. "And you did a beautiful thing, my grandson. Your parents would be proud. Grandma, I need to tell you something. I lost the job at the restaurant, but I already found another one. Don't worry about anything. Michael, my boy, I know you've been fighting alone to help me. You didn't have to hide about the job. We're in this life together, remember?" The tears came without warning. Michael had held in so much emotion over the past few days that when his grandmother spoke in that tender voice, everything crumbled. "It's hard, Grandma. Really hard." "I know, son. But you have a good heart, and people with good hearts are never left helpless for long. Trust me." On Monday, Michael arrived at Jennifer's office promptly at 8 in the morning. The office was in a commercial building in downtown Denver. Nothing too fancy, but tidy and cozy. Jennifer greeted him with a warm smile and introduced him to the 2 other employees, Jessica, the secretary, and Rachel, the law intern. "Your duties will vary," Jennifer explained as she showed him around. "Organizing files, processing documents, running some errands. Nothing too complicated, but it requires responsibility. You can count on me, Dr. Jennifer. Just Jennifer is fine. Here, we're all family." The first day flew by. Michael found he had a knack for organizing paperwork, and Jennifer treated all the staff with respect and kindness. It was a world apart from the restaurant, where Richard used to yell and belittle employees. At lunch, Jennifer called him into her office. "How was your morning?" "Really good. Thank you again for the opportunity." "Michael, can I ask you something personal? Why didn't you finish school?" The question caught him off guard. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "When my parents died, I was 16. My grandmother's health was already failing, and someone needed to work. There was no way to keep studying and working at the same time. What if there was a way for you to go back to school? Night classes, college?" "It would be a dream," Michael answered honestly. "I've always wanted to study business administration, but I can't afford it. There's something called a scholarship, and I know some people at private universities." Jennifer smiled. "How about we think about that?" Michael didn't know what to say. In just a week, his life had completely changed. From an unemployed waiter to an office worker with the chance to go back to school. "Why are you doing all this for me?" he asked, genuinely curious. Jennifer grew serious for a moment. "Because I recognize true kindness when I see it, and because—" She hesitated. "I wasn't always someone who helped others. For a long time, I was so focused on my career and my success that I forgot about compassion. Seeing what you did for Buddy, sacrificing your job for an animal you barely knew, reminded me of who I want to be." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. The following days brought a routine Michael hadn't experienced in years: stability. He woke up early, worked in a respectful environment, earned a fair wage, and even had the prospect of returning to school. Jennifer had gathered information about night classes and promised to help him with the costs. But there was a shadow over his happiness: missing Buddy. Mrs. Margaret had been discharged from the hospital and taken the dog home. Michael knew it was the right thing, that Buddy belonged to her, but he couldn't stop thinking about the animal he'd cared for so tenderly. It was at the end of his second week of work that Jennifer came into the office with a worried expression. "Michael, I need to talk to you. It's about my mother and Buddy." Michael's heart raced. Had something happened to them? "My mother is struggling to take care of Buddy on her own. She hasn't fully recovered from pneumonia, and Buddy is a big dog who needs daily exercise." Jennifer sighed. "She called me crying yesterday, saying she feels she can't give him the care he deserves." "What does that mean?" Michael asked, dreading the answer. "She's thinking about finding him a new family." Jennifer saw the despair on Michael's face. "But before making any decision, she wanted to talk to you. She wants to know if you'd be willing to visit them regularly. Maybe take Buddy for walks a few times a week." The relief was so overwhelming that Michael had to sit down. "Of course, I'd love to." "There's one more thing. My mother wants to meet your grandmother. She said she misses their friendship and, if her health allows, would like to visit her." The thought of his grandmother reuniting with her old friend filled Michael with joy. Dorothy had been through so much hardship in recent years. Anything that brought her happiness was welcome. That afternoon, Michael left work and went straight to Mrs. Margaret's house. She lived in an old two-story home in the Westridge neighborhood, with a large backyard that would be perfect for Buddy. When he arrived, he found the elderly woman sitting on the porch, watching the dog, who seemed restless and anxious. "Michael," Mrs. Margaret smiled when she saw him. "I'm so glad you came." Buddy ran to him as if greeting an old friend. Michael knelt and received the dog's affectionate licks, realizing just how much he'd missed that warmth. "He's been like this since yesterday," Mrs. Margaret explained. "Restless, like he's searching for something. I think he missed you." "I missed him too," Michael admitted. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "Physically better, but—" She hesitated. "Michael, can I be honest with you?" "Of course, Mrs. Margaret. I'm afraid I won't be able to take good care of Buddy. He's a young dog, he needs exercise, playtime, and I don't have the energy I used to." Her words were heavy with sadness. "I don't want to be selfish and keep him just because I miss the company." Michael sat beside her on the porch. "You're not being selfish, ma'am. Buddy loves you. Anyone can see that." But love isn't always enough, is it? Sometimes we have to think about what's best for those we love, even if it hurts. Those words echoed in Michael's heart. He knew exactly what Mrs. Margaret meant. How many times had he thought the same about his grandmother? How many times had he wondered if he could truly give her everything she deserved? What if we found a solution that works for everyone? Michael suggested hesitantly. What if I could help take care of Buddy? Not to take him away from you, but to be an extra pair of hands. Mrs. Margaret looked at him with interest. What do you have in mind? Well, I could come by every day after work. Take Buddy for walks, play with him in the yard, help with feeding. On weekends, we could go on longer outings. Michael spoke quickly, as if afraid she'd refuse. That way, you'd still have his company without all the physical responsibility. You'd do that. I'd be happy to. Buddy's become special to me too. And your grandmother? Wouldn't she mind you spending so much time here? Michael smiled. Actually, I think she'd be pleased. Especially if you'd like to visit her now and then. She speaks of you so fondly. Mrs. Margaret's eyes lit up. I'd love to see Dorothy. It's been so long since I've caught up with an old friend. So it's settled. Michael, you're saving me. Again. Mrs. Margaret took his hand in hers, frail but warm. But I have one condition. What's that? That you let me help with your studies. Jennifer told me about your plans to go back to school. I've saved up a bit and, well, it'd be an honor to invest in the education of my best friend's grandson. Michael felt tears welling up again. In 2 weeks, he'd lost a job and gained a new family. The following weeks brought a routine that felt almost too good to be true. Michael worked at Jennifer's office during the day, spent afternoons with Buddy at Mrs. Margaret's house, and began attending night classes 3 times a week. Mrs. Margaret insisted on covering all the fees, calling it her investment in the future. But the best part was seeing his grandmother, Dorothy, and Mrs. Margaret reunited. When the two saw each other after so many years, it was as if no time had passed. They talked for hours about their school days, the students who'd passed through their lives, the hardships and joys each had faced. Dorothy, you raised a wonderful young man, Mrs. Margaret said during one visit. Michael has a heart just like yours. He's always been my joy, his grandmother replied, looking at him with pride. Even in the hardest times, he never lost his kindness. Michael, who was playing with Buddy in the yard, overheard and felt his chest swell with gratitude. For the first time in years, it felt like everything was falling into place. But life has a way of reminding us nothing lasts forever. It was on a Friday afternoon when Jennifer came into the office with a tense expression Michael hadn't seen before. She asked to speak with him privately and closed the door. Michael, I need to tell you something important about the restaurant where you used to work. What about it? I received some disturbing information about the manager, Richard Thompson. Jennifer took a deep breath. It seems he's under investigation for diverting food. Supplies meant to be donated to charities are being illegally sold. Michael felt his stomach turn. What do you mean? A former employee came to my office. She has proof Richard has been skimming leftovers from the restaurant for years. Instead of donating to nursing homes and orphanages as required by law, he sold them to third parties and pocketed the money. That's awful, Michael murmured. What now? Now she wants to sue the restaurant, but she needs witnesses, people who worked there and saw the wrongdoing. Jennifer looked him straight in the eye. Your testimony would be very important, Michael, especially considering how you were fired. Michael felt a mix of anger and disgust. How many needy people could have been fed with the food Richard sold? How many abandoned animals could have been helped? Of course I'll testify, he said without hesitation. What Richard did to me was wrong, but this is much worse. Are you sure? It could be a long and complicated process. Richard will certainly try to defend himself, maybe even find ways to retaliate against you. I'm sure. I can't let him keep doing this. Jennifer smiled proudly. I knew you'd say that. In the following days, Michael gave his statement and provided all the information he could recall about the questionable practices at the restaurant. He discovered he wasn't the only employee who had been unfairly fired. Several others had gone through the same situation for questioning Richard's actions, but the fallout from the case was bigger than anyone expected. The story leaked to the local press, and soon all of Denver was talking about the manager who fired an employee for feeding a stray dog. The contrast between Richard's cruelty and Michael's kindness touched people's hearts. Journalists began reaching out to Michael for interviews, wanting to hear his side of the story. At first, he resisted, embarrassed by all the attention. But Jennifer convinced him that sharing his story could inspire others. "We live in a world where kindness seems rarer by the day," she said. "Your story shows there are still people willing to sacrifice something to do what's right." His first interview was for a local TV show. Michael was nervous, he'd never been on TV before, but when he started talking about Buddy and the importance of helping those in need, the words flowed naturally. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," he told the host. "Anyone with an ounce of compassion would have done the same. What saddens me is knowing there are people who'd profit from others' suffering." The interview had an unexpected impact. Jennifer's office phone wouldn't stop ringing with people offering Michael jobs, wanting to meet him, or simply sending messages of support. A local supermarket chain proposed a partnership to create a food donation program for stray animals. But the call that moved Michael the most came from someone unexpected. "Hello, Michael. This is Robert Williams, owner of the restaurant where you worked." Michael recognized the name. Robert owned the establishment, but lived in New York and rarely visited Denver. "Mr. Williams, I want to personally apologize for what happened to you. I just got back from a trip and learned about this whole situation. Richard was fired immediately, and I'd like to offer you your job back. In fact, I'd like to offer you the manager position." Michael was silent for a few seconds, processing the offer. "Mr. Williams, I really appreciate the offer, but I'm very happy in my current job." "I understand, but at least let me compensate you for your loss, and I have a different proposal. How about we turn the restaurant into a place that promotes the animal cause? We could create a program where part of the profits goes to helping abandoned animals." The idea intrigued Michael. Transforming the place where he had been humiliated into a symbol of hope for needy animals had a poetic touch that moved him. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Michael, I want you to know that people like you are rare. And I want you on my team one way or another." Or, Michael discussed the proposal with Jennifer, Mrs. Margaret, and his grandmother. They all agreed it would be an incredible opportunity to do something bigger, something that could impact the lives of many animals. "But you don't have to leave the office," Jennifer said. "We could partner up. You could manage the restaurant project in your free time, and I can provide the necessary legal support." "And I can help with the educational side," Mrs. Margaret added. "We could create awareness campaigns about animal care. And I can cheer you on," his grandmother Dorothy said with a smile, "and maybe help in the kitchen if you need a retired lunch lady." The meeting with Robert happened a week later. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a sincere expression. When Michael shared his ideas for the project, Robert's eyes lit up. "That's exactly what I had in mind," he exclaimed. "How about we call it the Loyal Friend Restaurant, and we could have a day of the week where people can bring their pets to have lunch together." "What if we create a special adoption space?" Michael suggested, excited. "People looking to adopt animals could meet them here." "Perfect. And how about a special menu for pets?" The ideas flowed between them like they were old partners. Jennifer watched the conversation with a smile, seeing how Michael had found his passion. In the following months, the project took shape in an amazing way. The restaurant underwent a complete renovation, gaining an outdoor space where pets were welcome and a small kennel where rescued animals awaited adoption. Robert invested heavily in the idea, hiring volunteer veterinarians and partnering with animal protection NGOs. Michael divided his time between Jennifer's office, his night studies, and managing the restaurant project. It was a busy life, but one full of purpose. Buddy became the official mascot of the Loyal Friend Restaurant, appearing in all the advertising campaigns alongside Michael. The grand opening of the new restaurant was an event that brought the whole city together. Hundreds of people showed up, many bringing their pets. The mayor of Denver was present and declared the day Municipal Animal Compassion Day. I never imagined that a simple act of sharing my food with a stray dog would lead to all this, Michael said during his opening speech. It proves that small acts of kindness can create big changes. The audience gave a standing ovation. Mrs. Margaret and his grandmother Dorothy sat in the front row, with Buddy between them, as proud as if Michael were both their son. Jennifer filmed everything, documenting every special moment. But the most emotional moment of the night came with an unexpected surprise. Richard Thompson appeared at the restaurant's door. An awkward silence fell as people recognized him. Michael felt all eyes turn to him, waiting for his reaction. Richard clearly looked uncomfortable, thinner, and like someone who had been through hard times. Michael slowly approached. When they stood face to face, Richard spoke first. "Michael, I came to apologize for what I did to you, for how I treated you." His voice was choked with emotion. "I lost everything because of my greed and cruelty. My family, my job, my reputation, and I deserved it." "Richard, no, let me finish. I've spent these months reflecting on who I became and realizing how people like you are, how you're the ones who truly matter." He looked around the transformed restaurant. "You turned this place into something beautiful. You turned my cruelty into compassion." Michael took a deep breath. Part of him wanted to say harsh words, to remind Richard of all the humiliation he had endured. But when he looked at Buddy, at Mrs. Margaret, at his grandmother, at all the people who had gathered there to celebrate kindness, he knew what the right answer was. "Richard, we all deserve a second chance. If you've truly changed, if you've truly understood the value of compassion, then you're welcome here." You forgive me?" "I forgive you. And more than that, if you want to help with the project, we have a lot of work ahead." Tears streamed down Richard's face. He reached out his hand to Michael, who shook it firmly. The audience burst into applause, many crying with emotion at that display of forgiveness and redemption. 2 years later, the Loyal Friend restaurant had become a national model for animal adoption and care programs. Michael had completed his GED and was pursuing a degree in business administration at a private university, with a full scholarship secured through Jennifer's connections. Richard worked as a volunteer for the project, coordinating an education program about animal abuse in schools. His transformation had been genuine and complete. He dedicated all his free time to repairing the harm he had caused. Mrs. Margaret and grandmother Dorothy had become inseparable again. They spent their afternoons at the restaurant, telling stories to the children who visited the animals and helping care for the pets awaiting adoption. Buddy, now 10 years old, remained healthy and happy, dividing his time between the two ladies and Michael. Jennifer had expanded her office and specialized in animal law, offering free services to animal protection non-profits. The success of the restaurant project had attracted other clients with similar causes, and she became a leading figure in the field. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Michael was in the restaurant's backyard, playing with the dogs waiting for adoption, when Jennifer approached with a mysterious expression. "Michael, I have a proposal for you." "Another one?" he joked. "The last one completely changed my life. This one could change it even more." Jennifer smiled. "A national TV network wants to make a documentary about our story, and after that, they want you to host a show about animal adoption and care." Michael stopped playing with the dogs and looked at her in surprise. "A TV show? Jennifer, I haven't even finished college yet. They don't want a technical expert. They want someone genuine, someone people can trust, someone who shows that small gestures can change the world." "I don't know. This is too big for me." "Michael," Mrs. Margaret interrupted, walking over with Buddy by her side. "Remember what I always told you in school, that our duty isn't just to learn, but to teach what we've learned?" "I remember." "Then that's what you can do. Teach the whole United States about compassion, about how every person can make a difference in the life of an abandoned animal." Michael looked around. The restaurant was full of happy families having lunch with their pets. In the adoption area, 3 dogs had found new homes just that week. Richard was enthusiastically talking to a group of children about how to care for animals. His grandmother Dorothy was in the kitchen, preparing special treats for the pets. All of it had started with a simple gesture of sharing his food with a stray dog. A gesture that had cost him his job at the time, but had now turned into something bigger than he ever imagined. "I accept," he finally said, "but on one condition." "What is it?" "That Buddy be my co-host." Everyone laughed, and Buddy wagged his tail as if he understood this would be a new adventure. The Loyal Friends show premiered 6 months later and became an instant success. Michael, with his natural charm and sincerity, won over viewers across the country. Each episode shared adoption stories, offered pet care tips, and showcased inspiring social projects. Buddy, now 11 years old, adapted perfectly to the recordings. His sweet and affectionate personality charmed everyone in the studio. He had become a national symbol of resilience and second chances. During one of the recordings, Michael received a special letter. It was from an 8-year-old girl in a small town in Kansas. "Hi, Michael. My name is Emily, and I'm 8 years old. I watch your show with my grandma every Sunday. I wanted to tell you that after we saw Buddy's story, I asked my mum if I could take care of a little kitten that showed up at our house. Now Whiskers is my best friend. Thank you for teaching me how important it is to help animals. Love, Emily." Michael read the letter on the show, his eyes brimming with tears. That little girl represented thousands of other children who were learning about compassion and responsibility through the stories he shared. "This is the true reward of our work," he told the cameras. "To knowing we're planting seeds of kindness in the hearts of the next generation." One special evening, 5 years after that fateful afternoon when he was fired for feeding Buddy, Michael was at home sorting through old photos when he found one that moved him deeply. It was a picture of himself at 8 years old, at the school where Mrs. Margaret had taught and his grandmother Dorothy had worked in the kitchen. In the photo, he was in the schoolyard, sharing his lunch with a classmate who hadn't brought any food. Mrs. Margaret stood in the background, smiling proudly. His grandmother Dorothy was visible through the kitchen window, watching the scene. Michael realized his tendency to help others hadn't started with Buddy. It was something that had been in him since childhood, something his 2 mothers had nurtured over the years. Buddy had simply been the catalyst for what was already in his heart. That same night, he called Jennifer with a new idea. What if we started a foundation? Something permanent that could keep helping animals even after our show ends? "Michael, you never stop surprising me, do you?" Jennifer laughed. "Of course. What name do you suggest?" Michael looked at Buddy, who was peacefully sleeping at his feet. "The Act of Love Foundation, because it all started with one small act of love for someone in need." Perfect. The Act of Love Foundation was officially launched the following year during an event that brought together thousands of people in Denver. The gathering included celebrities, politicians, and animal rights activists from across the country. In his speech, Michael made sure to thank everyone who had been pivotal in his journey. "I want to thank Mrs. Margaret, who taught me that true friendship spans decades and that second chances can change lives. My grandmother Dorothy, who taught me that kindness is the greatest treasure we can leave to the world. Jennifer, who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. Richard, who proved it's never too late to change and that forgiveness is a gift we first give ourselves. And most of all, he knelt beside Buddy, who was resting in his special bed on stage. I want to thank this loyal friend who changed my life just by existing. Buddy taught me that we don't need to speak the same language to communicate through love." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Buddy, despite being 12 years old and showing some signs of aging, stood up and wagged his tail as if he understood this was a special moment. In the years that followed, the Act of Love Foundation expanded its work across the United States. Hundreds of animals were rescued, treated, and adopted. Educational programs were implemented in thousands of schools. Affordable veterinary clinics opened in underserved communities. Michael, now a graduate in business administration with specializations in social management, divided his time between leading the foundation, hosting the TV show, and giving talks across the country. He never married, dedicating his life entirely to the cause he had embraced. Mrs. Margaret and Grandma Dorothy, now in their 80s, remained active in the foundation. They oversaw animal therapy programs in nursing homes and hospitals, bringing joy and companionship to elderly residents and hospitalized children. Richard had become the national coordinator of the foundation's educational programs. His personal transformation served as an example in talks about second chances and redemption. He often said that Michael hadn't just forgiven him, he had saved him from himself. Jennifer became the nation's leading advocate for animal rights, responsible for passing stricter laws against abuse and establishing legal precedents in animal rights cases. Her law firm, now with 50 employees, provided free legal counsel to all animal protection nonprofits in the US. One autumn afternoon, 14 years after that first encounter on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, Michael was in the foundation's backyard when he noticed Buddy was quieter than usual. The vet had warned that at 15 years old, Buddy was entering the final stage of his life. Michael sat beside his loyal friend and began to speak, as he always did when Buddy needed extra companionship. "You know, my friend, I've been thinking about everything we've been through together. Remember that first day when you were so skinny and abandoned? I felt lost back then too. Neither of us imagined that moment would change so many lives." Buddy lifted his head and looked at Michael with those gentle eyes that had won the hearts of America. "Because of you, thousands of animals found families. Hundreds of children learned about compassion. People like Richard discovered it's never too late to change. And me, I found my purpose in life." Michael gently stroked Buddy's head. "You were so much more than a friend. You were my teacher, my partner, my inspiration. And when it's time for you to rest, I want you to know your life made a difference in this world." Buddy closed his eyes and rested his head on Michael's lap, just as he had done that first day in his tiny apartment. There they were, the young man who had shared his last meal with a stranger, and the dog who had taught the world the true meaning of gratitude. 3 months later, on a quiet spring morning, Buddy passed away in his sleep, surrounded by everyone who loved him. Michael, Mrs. Margaret, Grandma Dorothy, Jennifer, and Richard were all there, each silently giving thanks for everything that special animal had brought into their lives. Buddy's funeral was broadcast nationwide and watched by millions of Americans. People from across the country sent flowers and heartfelt messages. An official day of mourning was declared in Denver, and a statue of Buddy was erected in the square outside the first restaurant where it all began. "Buddy didn't die," Michael said during the special tribute show. "He lives on in every animal saved by our foundation, in every child who learned compassion, in every person who chose to make a difference in the lives of those in need. His legacy is eternal." End of the story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story of perseverance and love? Where are you watching from? If you have a pet or have ever had a similar experience, share your heartfelt words in the comments. Do you believe small gestures can truly change the world? I'd love to read your thoughts and your own stories. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories that bring hope and show kindness still exists.